Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call the April 3rd City of Issaquah's Development Commission meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. As a reminder, we do still have a remote aspect to our meetings. This means both staff and members of the public may be participating in the meeting remotely via WebEx. For those attending remotely, if you have questions or issues, please send the host a chat message or email staff at christiang@issaquahwa.gov. Excused absence for this meeting is Commissioner Ikeda. Alternate member Ola Fasyun is filling in this evening as a regular member. Welcome, Ola. Our first item of business tonight, as usual, is to take action on our minutes from February the 7th. We've all had a chance to look them over. Are there any corrections to the February 7th minutes provided in the packet? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted. And I'd like to take a moment at this point to thank our recording secretary, Carolyn Garza, for her consistently excellent minutes. They're always clear and concise, and we can never find anything wrong with them. So thanks very much, Carolyn. Next, I'd like to open the floor for any members of the public, in person or virtually, who'd like to make a general comment, not about the Towns on 7th project, but on general topics. There will be an opportunity later in the meeting for those who'd like to comment about the project on tonight's agenda. Mr. Getz, has anyone signed up to make general public comments?
There is nobody that has signed up in person.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our regular business main agenda item, pre-decision open record public hearing. Order of operation for this hearing will be as follows. First, the purpose of the public hearing, followed by our appearance of fairness disclosures. Then we'll open the hearing with a staff presentation, then an applicant presentation. Then the floor will be open for public comment. There will be an opportunity for rebuttal by applicant and then staff, and then we'll close the public hearing. Commission deliberation will be followed then by commission action, including motions, amendments, discussions, and vote, and that will conclude the agenda item on the quasi-judicial permit. If for any reason the hearing on this action can't be completed this evening, the hearing may be continued to a specified date. Purpose of the public hearing. This is the formal public hearing for the Towns on 7th development. The proposal being considered is a site development permit application for a 29-unit attached townhouse project at the northwest corner of 7th Avenue Northwest and Holly Street. The purpose of this hearing is to solicit relevant public comment and facilitate review, discussion, and decision on the application by the Development Commission. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, and so, Mr. Getz, please proceed with our appearance of fairness disclosures.
Good evening, everybody. Commission, members of the public. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, and therefore we're going to go through the questions again. We do every time. Ex parte contacts are prohibited. Communications outside of the hearing between a decision maker and an opponent or proponent of the matter at hand, if such is prohibited. If such communications have occurred, record of the substance of the communication must be placed on the record to allow for other interested parties to the right to rebut the substance of the communication. The test that we have to do: would a disinterested person have been appraised of the totality of decision makers' personal interest in a matter being acted upon, be reasonably justified in thinking that partiality may exist? And for decision makers who have personal interest, prejudgment of issues, or partiality are disqualified from the proceeding. With regards to the outcome of this proceeding, do you have a personal interest, financial or otherwise, in the outcome?
No.
Does your employer have an interest, financial or otherwise, in the outcome?
No.
Do you have any familial, social, or business relationships or connections of any parties or non-parties who have an interest in the outcome?
No.
Do you have any special knowledge about the substantive or merits of this proceeding which would or could cause you to prejudge the outcome?
No.
Will there be any prospective employment for you or your family as a result of the decision?
No.
Do you own or control property within 300 feet of the subject property?
No.
Have you had any ex parte communications regarding this project?
No.
Overall, do you believe you can sit and hear this matter fairly and impartially, both as to the respective positions of the proponents and opponents of this matter?
Yes.
And questions for the audience. Does anyone in attendance wish to challenge the participation of any commissioner based on appearance of fairness doctrine? Very good.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll open the public hearing at 6:37 p.m. First, we're going to proceed with staff's presentation. Mr. Getz, I'll need to swear you in. Please state your name and position with the city for the record.
Christian Getz, current planning manager.
Do you swear by oath or affirmation the testimony you're about to provide is true?
Yes.
Thank you. Please proceed.
All right. Good evening again, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to see this project through. I am not the normal person that would be presenting this. I'm filling in for the planner on the project. I'm going to do my best. Myself and then the applicant will provide the background information on the town for the Towns on 7th proposal. I'm going to run through a very high-level overview, which is based on all the project materials found in the staff report and exhibits. The project site is comprised of 6 individual parcels, which currently contain a total of 4 detached single-family homes. The project site is located along the north side of Holly Street between 7th Avenue Northwest and Newport Way Northwest. And this is both within the central Issaquah sub-area and the mixed-use residential zoning. A brief summary of the proposal: it includes the development of 29 individual townhome-style condominium units within a total of 6 separate buildings, ranging from units of 1 to 10 in units and building size, for a total of just under 50,000 square feet of gross floor area. The buildings will incorporate a total of 55 parking spaces internal to the buildings, with 4 surface area parking stalls that are located within the internal driveway and circulation facilities. Direct vehicular access will be taken from 7th Avenue Northwest. Back on August 17th, 2022, my second day here, the Development Commission hosted a community conference with the applicant and the community, where you went through initial questions from members of the public as well as yourselves to discuss the project. The application was submitted on September 7th of 2022 and deemed complete on October 7th of 2022. It has followed all the required notification and distribution requirements provided in Title 18. And it should be noted that the project is being reviewed under the previous code. Both the land use applications and all of the construction permits were submitted prior to the June 1st effective date of the current Title 18 standards. Procedures do not vest, but we are following through any procedural standards from that point on, June 1st, with the current code requirements. So both development and site work and construction permits were submitted. And there's a variety of permits between demolition, site work, and construction. Moving on to transportation topic. The project site fronts along 3 rights-of-way. Frontage improvements are being provided through coordination with Public Works and their current project for Newport Way. The site for the project will build out the 7th Avenue Northwest frontage as part of the requirements. Development of the majority of Holly Street as well as Newport Way will be incorporated into the city Public Works project, where a roundabout is being located. So that will be completed at a later date. The project includes a new internal roadway consistent with the Central Issaquah design standards. for circulation facilities, and the site also incorporates a through-block passage that connects Newport to 7th down the center of the site. About midway through that through-block passage, there is an internal community open space. Central design standards require a total of just under 1,800 square feet of community recreational space. The applicant is proposing just under 2,500 square feet of community space in the form of an outdoor common space and some private patios for the individual units. Information about that can be found in more detail on page 98 or 108 of the packet. Those are sheets C7.03 and L2.01. Parking, the parking requirement totals only 29. The applicant is proposing 59. That's made up of both side-by-side and tandem parking stalls within the units, and then the 4 surface area parking within the circulation facility. Bicycle parking requires 2 spaces, and the applicant's proposing to include, meet the electric vehicle charging standards established in the code. Landscaping and tree requirements. A landscape plan with tree retention and replacement was provided and reviewed. Proposal was consistent with SID's standards in coordination with the conditions within the staff report. Complete review of the tree retention and installation will be completed within the building permits as well as the landscape and site work permits, which are in review at this time. Preliminary lighting design has been reviewed as part of the site development permit, and final lighting review will be completed with the construction permits confirming light levels and standards that were required as part of the previous lighting code. The architecture and urban design requirements, the applicant's located in the traditional Issaquah area and has selected arts and crafts as their architectural style. Common characteristics include boxy base with rectangular expression, typically 3 to 5 stories. They are proposing 4-story structures with steep pitch roofs and gables. The sample tiles are over there towards the end of the dais for consideration. And last but not least, SEPA. Project went through SEPA determination based on the project size. DNS was issued on March 13th of 2024. Additionally, there are no critical areas on or adjacent to the site, and no mitigation measures were required. All mitigation will be handled through the development standards in the code. Any clarifying questions for staff?
Do you know when the roundabout is scheduled to be constructed?
I believe 2025 is when the construction will begin, and it's a phased project along the entirety of Newport Way.
I did have one question. Come to think of it, in the packet, it's very comprehensive, but full architectural sets weren't provided, meaning all plans, all elevations. I was curious why. Is it because it's come before us before? Because typically we see those, especially if we're reviewing them for architectural design.
I'm not sure. The full building permit site plan sets are in. Make those available.
Okay.
To the record.
I guess just a view of the building in its entirety, like all elevations, et cetera, you know, so if we're reviewing it for things like blank walls and siding patterns, general style, I don't feel like we have a view into the building in its entirety. Okay.
I have a question. Speaking of the roundabout, a Newport Way, do we have online or something? Is there a comprehensive plan for that we can view? Is that available to the public?
I believe there is capital improvement project information for that project. I think they have a website for it. working through that.
Other questions for staff? I'd like to echo the point about few elevations, and maybe the applicant will be able to address that in his presentation. So thank you very much. Now we'll proceed with the applicant's presentation. Whoever's speaking, I will need to swear you in. Please state your name for the record.
Alex Clossy.
And do you swear by oath or affirmation the testimony you're about to provide is true?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
My name is Alex Clossy. I'm with Milbrand Architects, and I'm here on behalf of the Blue Fern Development Team, presenting our Townsend 7 project. Thank you to the Development Commission for taking the time to listen and learn about our project, and also for the public for all of your interest and comments throughout this entire process. We look forward to presenting. I do want to thank Christian as well for a great presentation, and I apologize, some of this information will be redundant, but I'll try and highlight some different aspects as well. To introduce our project team, as I mentioned, Blue Fern Development is the owner and developer. Core Design is the civil engineer and landscape architect on the project. Myself with Milbrand, and we also have consulting arborist Favreau Green Forest, and 10W is the traffic engineer that's been helping us with traffic and lighting design on the project. Again, I will try and breeze through some of this stuff because it is kind of follow up to what Christian already said, but for the overall site and context, again, the project is located at the intersections of Newport Way Northwest and Northwest Holly Street, and then also Northwest Holly Street and 7th Avenue Northwest. It is a congregation of 6 parcels which are currently occupied by single-family residential use. It is zoned MUR and under the Central Issaquah District sub-area, and as Christian mentioned, the land use for the project is vested to the previous version of Title 18, as well as the Central Issaquah Development and Design Standards. And so that's what it will be reviewed under and what we have been working under. The proposed use on the site is multifamily 3 and 4 units and 5+ units, as well as the 1 single family structure to the north of the site that was mentioned. Those are all permitted uses under the MUR zoning. And the total site area is just over 1.3 acres. And then on the bottom of the slide above, you can see the FAR, the base FAR requirement for the zone, which is the governing zoning mechanism, as well as what this project is proposing, which is within the limits of the base FAR. For a quick summary of our proposal, again, we're proposing 29 total townhome units in 6 structures, ranging from 1 to 10 units in each structure. There will be 3-story units with a habitable attic space at the 4th level, and we have 59 parking stalls. The parking requirement for MUR zoning is 1 stall per unit, so we are in excess of the required 29, and we will be providing EV parking per code requirements in all of the unit garages. And I'd also like to touch on the 10 tandem garage spaces which are proposed. The code allows a maximum of 50% of the required parking to be tandem. At 10 of the 59 spaces, we are right around 18% tandem parking. Vehicular access to the site will be taken from the 7th Avenue side of the site and then through the site with the internal alleyway system. And other large kind of design components are, as mentioned, the central community space, and then the various frontage improvements along the 3 frontages of the site. I'd also like to note that we are not proposing any deviations or adjustments to standards. We are just designing this project under the code as it exists. So moving on to some more specific details about the site improvements. As mentioned, there is the proposed capital improvement project at the intersection of Newport Way and Holly Street. You can see that on the site plan on the slide above, kind of superimposed over the existing conditions. And you can see how our proposed site design is intended to respond to that future roundabout improvement in the way that the buildings are sited in place to create a strong street frontage along that roundabout, as well as the small area of site that has been dedicated for the future use of that roundabout. As Christian mentioned, the ultimate frontage improvements along Newport and Holly Street will be part of that roundabout capital improvement project. Along 7th Avenue, this project will be building out frontage improvements, and those will be inclusive of added parallel parking stalls adjacent to the travel lane on the street, as well as a landscape strip and sidewalk. There's currently no sidewalk on 7th Avenue in its existing condition, so that will be added as part of the project improvements. Vehicular access to the site, as mentioned, is taken in the northeast corner of the site on 7th Avenue. That is from the lowest classification street frontage along the site and located kind of as far north from the intersection for safety purposes as was feasible. And then internally, we have the internal drive alleyway, which provides both vehicular access to all the unit garages, the surface parking on site, as well as emergency access to the buildings and structures internal to the site. And then we also have a primary pedestrian through-block passage that runs east-west throughout the site, connecting 7th Avenue with Newport Avenue, and helping to reduce the block length in compliance with the SID standards. And then the last thing that I would point out is in relation to tree retention requirements, the 2 trees to the north of the site that are shaded gray are what trees are proposed for tree retention. Those meet the threshold requirements out of the code for the total caliper, 25%, which is to be retained on site, and also provide the added benefit of buffering the existing residential parcels to the north slightly from our site, and in particular from the larger multi-unit structures to help transition our site to the smaller scale residential to the north. And then these next couple slides, I just want to highlight a couple different components of the design, similar to what Christian did. So the first one is the community space. The different requirements for community spaces were touched upon, can be individual private space in the forms of decks or patios, which the majority of the units comply with in some form, and then also a private common community space, which is what is shown here, and that fulfills the rest of the community space requirements from a square footage perspective. And then also for units, or for projects that have 22 plus units, we are required by code to provide one on-site amenity of at least 400 square feet. And that is also included in this centralized community space plan. You can see the square footage requirements and what is provided up on the slide, as well as the proposed design. And a couple aspects of that I would like to highlight are the inclusion of some overhead structures within the community space, which will provide shade, also increase the ability for the space to be used year-round based on weather conditions. And I'd also like to say that this community space is intended to be for the private use of the residents, and therefore it is located centrally on site for ease of access among the primary pedestrian pathways for all the residents. Moving on to landscaping requirements, as I mentioned, there are 2 trees to the north of the site that are being retained and meeting the on-site retention requirements. The remainder of existing on-site trees will be removed as part of the development proposal, and 29 replacement trees will be required. In addition, the site area has a requirement for 46 trees, so that is the governing factor in terms of the planting plan. And we are providing 48 trees in the landscape proposal, and you can see those in the landscape plans, generally located along pedestrian pathways in the setback areas between the building and the street frontages and around the community open space to help green those areas up. Other items to point out in the landscape plan in relation to SIDS Chapter 16.2 include landscaping that buffers the surface parking stalls from the community open space, as well as some dense landscaping in the building setbacks from the right-of-way frontages that adds layer and texture adjacent to the unit entries that front the street. And then also landscaping that buffers all of our pedestrian pathways and is integrated in the pedestrian spaces throughout the site. For lighting, we also have lighting integrated on all of our pedestrian pathways, and there's a little legend in the lighting plan that you can see, but we are proposing to do pedestrian scale lighting along the through block passage. An example of that would be the pedestal or bollard lighting fixture that is in the upper right hand corner of the slide, and then also providing unit lighting at all entries, at all primary entrances to unit, and then street lighting per the City of Issaquah standards along 7th Street. The street lighting for the remaining 2 frontages would also be part of the final frontage improvements based on the roundabout improvement project. For the lighting fixtures, as is typical here in Issaquah and in many surrounding jurisdictions, the emphasis being placed on downlighting, dark skies, and making sure that we're preventing glare from going off-site through our lighting fixtures. Talk a little bit about the architecture of the buildings, and I do want to address the Design Commission's question about the elevations. I believe in the submitted materials there should be an elevation package that has all elevations of all 6 buildings. If there is not, we can get you that. That was in previous materials that were submitted at various points. I didn't include all of the elevations of every building in the slideshow, but I do have an example building that has a side elevation and a rear elevation as well. It's on the next slide after this. So this is located in the traditional Issaquah district in the central Issaquah sub-area, and we have selected the arts and crafts style as our guide for designing the elevations on the building. As Christian had mentioned, with arts and crafts style, some of the characteristics of that are steeply pitched roofs with dormers and gables, asymmetrical facade composition, masonry materials forming a solid base, and a base that is rectilinear in nature. There is a limit of 3 materials to be proposed on the elevations. Some of the more detail-oriented elements are vertically oriented windows in residential design that are either paired or in groupings of 3. Detailing around the windowsills, particularly in the masonry components of the building, should have protruding windowsills with stone or brick lintels. Covered entry porches that provide weather protection to all primary pedestrian entries to the unit. Full light glazing on entry doors, and for color schemes, earth tone colors of whites, grays, dark grays, as well as brick in its natural state unpainted. The arts and crafts style is appropriate for buildings 3 to 5 stories in height per the urban design manual, and some other very detailed components would be steeply pitched roofs. So we are proposing 10 10-12 slope roofs with shallow overhangs. And you can see in the image above gables and dormers at the habitable attic spaces. The roofing material is just composition singles and should not dominate the structure, both in color and texture. And windows are adorned with simple and unadorned window frames. And then, Christian, if you want to move to the next slide. So that is a alley side elevation with the garage doors, and then a street facing side elevation where we have incorporated a kind of a wraparound porch element. This would be fronting along 7th Avenue. And then finally, as mentioned, through the various processes with this project, we have completed SEPA review, received a determination of non-significance, and then the staff report that Christian presented, a recommendation for approval with conditions by staff. And through this entire process, we feel that our team has developed a project that is going to bring value to the city of Issaquah, provide housing units that address a need in the region, and create a space that is in alignment with the goals and standards of the central Issaquah design and development standards, as well as Issaquah's comprehensive plan. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Commissioner Morgan, you have one?
Yeah. The through block passage, as I read the plans, it's a 10-foot wide concrete walkway within a 20-foot easement.
That's correct.
And I think when I was reading the staff report, it talked about a 10-foot wide walkway with a 5-foot landscaping area. But in the way I read the code for a through block passage, for a pedestrian bike only passage, it says a minimum 15 feet walkway width. And so it sounds to me like we need 15 feet of walkway, not 10. Is that?
I do wonder if, I don't know if, is that a discrepancy potentially between the new standards and the old standards?
I don't know, because that's the urban design standards. It's page 702 of the package that we had tonight that has the urban design standards in it.
Okay. So oh, go ahead.
I would say, so it seems like there's enough room to put a 15-foot wide walkway.
Yeah.
That would then meet code.
Correct. So it is within a 20-foot easement. And the 5-10-5 configuration, I would point you to chapter 6.4, I believe, where it outlines the various road profiles. And so I do know that that's where that information was pulled from and designed around in terms of, what is governing or correct. I guess
for roads, not through block passages?
Well, there's cross sections of both the primary through block passage, the secondary through block passage, and then the various roadway, boulevard, alley configurations. And that's in, I don't have it in the copy of the SIDS in front of me, but it's 6.4, I believe.
Okay. Because, yeah, so the map on, for the urban design standards, and this is on through block passages, pedestrian, and it's got a chart showing a minimum 15-foot walkway that goes along with the text. So it seems like to meet the through block passage requirements, we have to have 15 feet of walkway.
Okay.
So would that, if we put add a condition in saying that the walkway, the through block passage walkway will be a minimum of 15 feet, is that going to work?
And that would just reduce the amount of landscaping on either side then?
I think so, because it doesn't, I don't think it says anything about landscaping requirements.
Yeah, I mean, from a site plan perspective, there's obviously the room to do that.
Yeah.
The benefits of a 15-foot wide walkway versus 10, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Just want to make sure that we're meeting code with that.
Yeah, what the code says.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I the only thing I would add to that is for me and Christian to go back and double check on our end to see, because I do know that 510.5 did come out of maybe a different portion of the code, and that's
Okay.
and that also has been what has been in the design through all the rounds of review and those things. So.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. Another question on the temporary sidewalk, where the roundabout would be. If I understand, the sidewalk requirements like on 7th are a 6-foot wide sidewalk, and the temporary sidewalk would be a 4-foot asphalt sidewalk?
Yep.
Are there requirements for, I'm wondering why a temporary sidewalk would only need to be 4 feet wide if a regular sidewalk is 6? And especially thinking about if two people in wheelchairs are trying to pass each other, can they do so in a 4-foot wide? In other words, could that be changed to be a minimum of 6 feet?
Yeah, we coordinated with Public Works on the temporary nature of that sidewalk and the material being asphalt, because it will eventually be ripped out and then installed per street standards. We can double check with them on what that minimum can be. And if they were picking that 4 feet based on room for the improvements to be installed within a really a very small tight space.
Because that will eventually just all come out, right?
Correct.
Okay. But I also wonder sometimes some public projects don't happen as quickly as we think. And again, I don't know that a 4-foot wide sidewalk would be considered accessible. Are there any ADA requirements? And it would seem to me that if we have any sidewalk, it should meet the minimum sidewalk requirements width-wise. Is that something I can put a condition into?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay. And there was something else in the staff report. I couldn't find it, but I think it talked about the 18-foot driveway width would have to be at least 20. But when I read the plans, it all looks like 20 feet wide to me.
Yeah. So the alleyway requirement is 18 feet, but for emergency access purposes, they need 20, and so it's provided.
And you're
at
all
20.
at 20. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
I had a question, and I don't know if you're this far along in the details of the design, but the doors, and again, I couldn't really get a sense of them from the information provided, but the front doors, are they a store door?
No, it'd be a residential door just with a large glazing light in it.
Like one large single light?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
or divided up in some sense. The code standards just speak to there being glazing in the door.
I agree. And I looking closer at it, though, it says store door is more appropriate for commercial use, whereas residential is looking for a heavier, more opaque wooden door to give a sense of comfort and protection. Now, I think any door should probably have a light in it. It'll be the preferred. But from the doors shown, they appear to be a full light door.
Correct.
So I just wonder how you reconcile that against the style requirement.
So maybe, excuse me, maybe more of just like a higher light up in the door to allow light through, but a more...
Or even like a 2/3, 1/3
Yeah.
or something. So it doesn't have such a commercial contemporary appearance, I think, is what I'm looking at. And then the garage doors, what are they? Are they a solid? Or do they have a light at the top or a raised panel?
So Christian, if you can go back, maybe.
And I apologize. The elevations were part of the application materials. All of them did not make it into the packet.
Yeah, so right now we're just proposing a solid garage door.
I'm sorry. Do they have any raised panel or any character at all, or are they just a smooth flat?
No, it'd be like your typical panelized
Okay.
with the, I don't know what it's called, but kind of that texture panel bump out on it.
Okay, yeah, I think a panel of some sort would be preferred, again, in keeping with the style, but also just bringing a residential character to this, steering away from a more contemporary, modern feel. And I know it's hard to strike a balance these days with this style and the consumer's appetite for, but I think you've done a great job. I think it's a good-looking building. Thanks for the additional elevations. That really helps. So I think those doors and that ground level experience is really important, though. So especially for pedestrians and people at that level, and just people on the street. So, and of course the people who occupy these buildings. All right, thanks for your feedback.
Thank you.
A related question, I think, probably on the windows. Okay. In the SIDS on windows, it says the objective for window design is to use vertically oriented residential character windows for all uses. And I know you have we can see a few horizontal windows here on the first floor. And I think you do address that in your project narrative somewhere, but I wonder about your thinking about including some of the horizontal windows there that look a little unusual with arts and crafts style, and I wonder why some horizontals there, not all small verticals.
Sure. Those horizontals are actually specifically located to the tandem garage units. So that wall right there is, on the other side of that is the second tandem garage stall. And so the thought process there was part from an attractiveness standpoint, not walking down your pedestrian through-block passage or the public sidewalk on the right-of-way and looking directly into somebody's garage. And then also from the resident side, not having a large window into your garage space from a security standpoint.
Okay, is that the case too on the front elevation that we see there in building 1, the horizontal windows there? Upper right.
Yeah. So pretty much, I'm looking at building 4 in my notes here, but yeah, any of those, like the windows that are in building 1 there in the brick, those are the tandem garages. The one, so that horizontal window on our rear elevation, that is just like a high window in the bonus room space at the ground level. It has a large window, that left-hand window on the front elevation. That would be the primary window for that room, and then doing a high window so you could put a bed or a desk underneath it.
Okay, and those are all clear windows then, right? Is that right?
Correct.
Did you think about just splitting those into like 4 small square windows instead of the horizontal? Or
To comply more with kind of the vertical aspect.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you could do that either through, physically gaining together windows or adding some type of mullion grid into them.
Yeah, well, I'll defer to the architects on our commission for decision on that one, but thank you. Also, the doors, do they have any kind of surrounds on them, stone surround or stone lintel or anything like that?
So the stone lintel for the project is actually located on the leading edge of the covered port space. And then, in the internal, as you walk into the porch, so you just have siding and trim at that rear wall or at the door wall.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions at this point? Commissioner Morgan.
One of the, I guess just, this is just a comment, I guess, Christian, for, I think, a change to the write-up about it, on page 41, it says that all trees within the developable site area are proposed to be removed for this project. It states that within the staff report, but you confirmed, I think, 2 significant trees are being kept, correct?
Yeah, and Christian and I apologize for not seeing that in the staff report. But yes, up near the single-family detached unit, which is building 6 in the site plan, there are 2 trees, on-site trees that we're proposing for retention.
Great, thank you. So maybe the staff report could be edited for that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions at this point? Commissioner Brennan.
Thank you. Just for information purposes, the frontage improvements along 7th, it notes in the staff report that additional on-street parking will be provided for those improvements along the frontage of this project. How many new stalls will be used that improvement?
A great question, and I don't know if I have the exact number. They're parallel stalls, so I would assume somewhere in the vicinity of 4 to 5. It looks like there's one proposed to the north of the driveway cut, and then probably 3 or 4 to the south.
Okay. Yeah, I guess.
Yep.
But it wasn't. There's also in the staff report, it talks about in the parking section, location of a motorcycle parking space yet to be determined. So these are all, and this is a puzzle with lots of pieces. So wondering where you're making the space for motorcycle parking that's part in the.
So the applicant's proposal for motorcycle parking being, as these are essentially townhomes in functionality, is that you would be able to park your motorcycle in your garage in that additional parking space that you have in the garage. And then same thing for, we're providing the 2 bicycle stalls that go in that community space, but there's also additional room in the garage spaces outside of the parking stalls for bicycle storage and to store your trash bins.
So the staff to Kristen on that one, so the motorcycle parking, it's not a specific visitor's parking space or anything like that. Under the code, it's part of parking scheme for the project.
Correct.
Helps that, clarifies that for me. And then also with the elevations, it was a challenge not having the elevations packet. And so I'm looking at the frontage along Newport and then Hawley, which is going to be very, very visible for that roundabout once it is constructed in 2025. So can you describe, and maybe you could put the elevations back up, but what's the frontage going to look like? Is it essentially repetition of the elevations that you provided with the loops and the entries to the unit?
Yeah.
And then there's also a landscape right at the corner. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe you can describe, since we don't have the elevations, maybe you can describe to us what that visual experience.
Sure. I think probably the best way to go about this, Christian, if you could maybe go back to the site improvement slide that has the colorized landscape plan. Oh, yeah. Perfect. So this is a good representation of what that experience coming around that roundabout will be. As I touched on a little bit in my presentation, we've sited and situated the buildings to work with kind of the curvilinear nature of that roundabout. And so the most western building, building 3, is angled to kind of line up with that curvature as you come around, and you would have front stoops. There's 4 units in that building. You'd have the front stoops of those as you're coming through, and then between buildings 2 and 3, there's kind of that triangular park landscape space. So that gives some relief as you're coming around the corner, and then ultimately as you turn onto Holly Street there, you're going to end up with the kind of repetition of the unit entries, which all face onto the street. And then in alignment with some other sections out of the SIDS code, we've done a lot of landscaping in all of those essentially unit front yards. So you'd have your sidewalk access to the front unit entries and a nice landscape space in that 10-foot setback there to really try and provide both a buffer to the units as you transition from the public to the private, but also just give some texture and some color and layering in front of the building face and create a nice experience for pedestrians.
I think if they do something, landscaping in the roundabout.
Yeah.
Visual as you go. So, and similarly, can you share, maybe you could use the elevations that you've got, but the frontage along 7, still challenging, fully comprehend what.
Sure.
And this is building 3, so this is where you were just discussing.
Yeah, so
the
this
roundabout.
is building 3, sorry, to go back to the roundabout, this would be essentially facing directly onto the center of that roundabout,
Okay.
the upper elevation there. And so there you can see some of the asymmetrical facade design, and, you know, still the steeply pitched roofs and other elements that we've talked about, and then kind of the nice delineation of the residential entrances along that frontage.
So that would be similar to 7th then? What the elevation?
Yeah, so Christian, if do you have the full elevation packet up? So if you want to go to the buildings that front 7th are building 1. So if you want to start there. So this left-hand elevation right here is the 7th Street frontage for building 1. The 2 units that front 7th Street almost have dual entries. So we have the kind of 2 interior entry doors that you can see. And again, we can kind of refine the door concept as we go forward. And then also the primary unit entrance, because we wanted to pay respect to both Holly Street on the left side and the through-block passage to the north on the site, or to the right side on the sheet. So they have entrances and porch areas that front both of those spaces that are on the corner of the building. So we have kind of a nice corner porch entry, as well as the presence along 7th Street, and then the upper floor balcony that fronts onto 7th Street. And then if you go to building 4, and this one was on that last slide as well. So the essentially the side elevation of the unit, building 4, which is over on the right side of the slide here. As I touched on in the presentation, trying to wrap that porch element around the corner from the entry off of the through-block passageway and then around to 7th to kind of define a strong corner at the intersection of the through-block passage with the sidewalk in 7th, which is going to be a primary pedestrian kind of gateway into the site, and frame that with a strong porch element. And then the last elevation that technically fronts onto 7th, but it is much set back because of the tree that we are preserving, is that single family residence to the north.
And then along 7th, looks like you'll be installing some street trees or part of the frontage.
Yeah, street trees, and then street lighting for 7th Avenue, and that amenity landscape strip as well.
That's helpful.
Yep.
Other questions?
Commissioner Moore.
Sure. Yeah, sorry. Condition 21 just says prior to and appears incomplete. Was something intended to be there?
No, that was an editing.
So will we delete
editing
it?
issue, yeah.
Okay. And follow up on Commissioner Morgan's comment. If we do add a condition, I think maybe verify walkway width for through block passage, since there could be a conflict. And if there is a conflict, I would prefer the smaller and less impervious area.
Great. And on the other question on the temporary, I think I just answered my own question by looking some stuff up, and it looks to me like ADA requirement can be only as small as 3 feet, but there has to be, every 200 feet, there has to be a 5x5, 25-foot square passing area. And I wondered on the plans that show that sidewalk, there's a little square that says 5x5, and it says passing area. And I realized now, I looked at it, I didn't know what that was, and now I know what that is. So that 2 wheelchairs could pass at that location. So I can see where maybe that's in conformance. I won't bother with a condition.
Other questions, comments? Hearing none, thanks to the applicant for that.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move into the public comment portion of the hearing. Mr. Getz, has anyone signed up to comment on this topic?
Nobody has signed up in person, and Stephen, there are a couple folks online if you want to check in with them.
Yes, Chair Sanford. No one has their hand raised, but I'm going to quickly ask virtual attendees if they wanted to speak.
Thank you.
The virtual attendee named Wagner, did you want to speak for public comment tonight? I just unmuted your mic.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. And then how about the virtual attendee named SR? I'm unmuting you now. Would you like to speak for public comment tonight? Try again. Virtual attendee SR, would you like to speak for public comment tonight?
No, thank you.
Okay. Chair Sanford, you have no virtual attendees who would like to speak.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else online or in the room like to speak? So we have no rebuttal by applicant or staff to speakers. Commissioners, are there any objections to closing the public hearing at this time? Hearing no objections, I'll now close the public hearing at 7:37 p.m. Now it's time to move into the deliberation portion of the meeting. Commissioners, any discussion? Commissioner Brennan?
Just to weigh in on the through block passage, I think there may be, but I would lean more toward the 10-foot versus forcing the 15-foot. If their code says that's the minimum, then that 10-foot wide for, given the location of this and the number of people who will actually be using it, there won't be lots of people. I don't see it. And 10 feet is fairly small. More landscaping. Preference. Concern.
Commissioner Price?
I would agree. And, and I believe those are also the resident entrances, right? So the more landscaping and buffer between the through block and the actual door, I think, is more appropriate. So I would be in favor of that as well.
Commissioner Gilbert, do you have a question?
I'm considering what we were talking about earlier with the windows, and I wonder if we could get the elevations up again. So the horizontal windows, to me, they look like they're just really tiny slivers, and they don't have any kind of connection to the windows that are above them in proportion. And I was considering maybe saying that they should be a little bit taller, like maybe half of the height of the windows above them, so they have some kind of visual relation. What do you think about that?
I would agree, absolutely. I think proportionally that would be appropriate. I think a second way to mitigate that with a taller proportion is to introduce divided lights that create a square to vertical individual light. Even though you have a longer proportion for the window overall, the unit, at least the proportion of the light itself is square to vertical, which would meet the standard. So, and I agree that if they could have the same proportion of the upper light of the double hung, that would be.
I agree with you too about the divided light.
I have one question. I guess this may be to staff. So the requirement here is for sidewalk improvement in front of the development only, correct? I was wondering, will there be any coordination with the city to try to develop sidewalk all the way down 7th? From, let's say, Holly, is that to Juniper? Right now, the block, you would have sidewalk that just ends with no sidewalk, is that right?
I believe so. So it'd be sort of patchwork as redevelopment occurs
Okay.
without a independent capital improvement project to see that through.
Okay, so that's not necessarily part of the plan right now,
Right.
then?
Right.
Okay. Another question, I think this may be for staff too. During construction, there was some public concern regarding parking during construction worker parking. Will that be part of the construction permit to specify where construction workers will be parking, or is that something that's optional part of a construction permit?
Yes, as part of the newly adopted contractor code of conduct, there are limitations on where vehicles can park,
Okay.
site maintenance, locating vehicles on the site that's being developed. And for those that may have large crews that come out there, they'll have to kind of coordinate and figure out how to bring them in and carpool or.
Right, so there will be a plan for that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you. Other questions, comments? Are we satisfied that we have enough elevations that we can make a reasonable assessment about it? Yeah. Thank
And if it would please the commission, staff can add all those elevations in as Exhibit R just to put them within the record. Okay.
Since they were shown here.
Yep.
you. Any further discussion? With deliberation concluded, it's time for the commission to take action on the item before us. Is there a motion on the item before the commission?
I move that the Development Commission approve the site development permit for Towns on 7th Condominium Townhomes, SDP 22-00003, as described and evaluated in the staff report dated March 27th, 2024, with exhibits A through Q, subject to the conditions therein and as amended tonight. And I move that the Development Commission direct the Community Planning and Development Department to prepare findings of fact and conclusions for review and approval by the Development Commission Chair, affirming the Development Commission's decision to approve the Towns on 7th SDP 22-0003, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report dated March 27th, 2024, with exhibits A through Q and as amended tonight.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for approval of the SCP. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, I propose we add condition 29, stating the through block passage walkway shall be a minimum of 15 feet wide if required to conform with Central Issaquah Architecture and Urban Design Manual UD.2.2.1.1.
Or a second?
Second.
Discussion of the amendment.
And I would say I would agree with a 10-foot width being better, but I also want to make sure that we're supposed to follow code, we follow code.
Yeah, that one, as far as the wording, if there's a conflict, what prevails here? Because the way the worded, it's required to meet that. Now we have a conflict. What prevails? I guess that would be. Because you've got, it sounds like we've got a standard, central, talks about through block passage.
Yeah. made my motion.
Correct. And to maybe answer some of the questions, part of the recent code update, it eliminated the variation in through block passage widths and just went with one standard.
So this part of the challenge here is this one got kind of caught in the middle.
Correct.
What is the number in the new code?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Oh,
I don't
okay,
know
I
that.
thought you had it open.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to amend my motion
Please.
to add on to the end of the motion to state where it says to conform with requirement unless allowed by some other portion of the code.
Commissioner Brennan, makes sense to you?
Yes, I'm fine with the amendment as seconder.
Okay, good. Any other discussion of the amendment? Could you restate the amendment then, Commissioner Morgan, please?
The through block passage walkway shall be a minimum of 15 feet wide if required to conform with UD 2.2.1.1 unless allowed otherwise be narrower by code.
All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Motion carries unanimously. And would that be condition 29 or 28 then?
I believe it would be 28 with
Okay,
the with
because
the
21 was,
Yep.
yeah. Any other discussion, amendments, conditions, and so on?
Well, more of a
Commissioner
point of
Price.
order about a condition, I guess 30 or 31. Is it in our purview to add conditions for the architectural style, or can it only be pertain to code? I mean, is this code or is this a guideline? Or does it matter?
I believe if there's room within the guidelines to make recommendation and conditions, you have that ability to, you know, in regard to, you know, say the windows, for example.
Okay. Well, then I would make a motion to add an amendment that the front doors be residential in character and be majority opaque, you know, and that can be, again, 2/3, 1/3. You can, I think it would be a really handsome door if you push the limit on that and get as much glazing as possible. But that would, I guess, to restate that, residential character doors, majority of which are opaque. Is that?
Second that?
Second? Discussion? All in favor of the amendment as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
As stated in the edited version. Condensed.
And I think that was probably condition 29. Other conditions, amendments, discussion? Commissioner,
Yeah,
Gilbert.
I mean, I don't know if we want to make it amendment or just a recommendation on the windows. And maybe we just leave it as a,
well, I would be for a condition. If you're not going to state it, I will regarding,
okay.
I want to make them vertical too.
okay. I'll let you state it, actually.
Well, okay, we'll pick up on our combined sentiment here that I think this would be condition 30. Horizontal windows will be replaced with vertical windows consistent with the arts and crafts style. And they can be small and they can be, you know, lined together and all that, but just so we maintain that verticality. Second.
Second the motion.
Are we going to have any discussion? Or do we?
Discussion.
Discussion.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I think it would also be acceptable if divided lights were included to create a proportion that's square to vertical versus if there's some reason they can't truly extend those windows.
Okay.
Just to give them some flexibility in the design.
Horizontal windows will be replaced with vertical windows or divided lights consistent with the arts and crafts style.
Perfect.
Does that work for you?
And as a preference, I liked the idea of half the width of the upper the vertical lines.
Other discussion? All in favor of the condition, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Condition carries. Any other discussion, conditions, amendment? Hearing none, we are to vote on the main motion before us regarding approval of the SDP before us tonight. And so we will proceed with that now. All in favor of the main motion to approve the SDP indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Carries unanimously. Thank you. This concludes the Towns on 7th development permit. A notice of decision will be issued by staff within 7 days. Okay, I'd like to ask staff to provide any updates on our city council activities at this point.
I have no updates other than the fact that council and commissions are working through the comprehensive plan updates. Nothing else to report at this time.
Any other items of business or announcements from staff?
Yes, as part of the clerk's, I'm going to pull this up here real quick. The clerk's office wanted to have all boards and commissions explore something of a regular work plan to set the table for every calendar year. As this commission is more reactionary to items, the draft development commission example in the packet really just has a couple administrative items that would be regular elements of a work plan, unless items such as the Title 18 updates that were scheduled where you provided input would be put on that calendar. So you have a little bit more predictability in 1 or 2 meetings that may occur throughout the year at the conclusion of new appointments, and then be able to do that without going months before we might meet again. So that was more just for your information, just a kind of a draft thought process that all the commissions or boards are discussing at this time.
Thanks. Any other business or announcements?
No, none at this time.
There being no further business before the commission, I adjourn the meeting at 7:43 p.m. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to add post adjournment. Thanks very much to the applicant and the applicant's architect for designing a project that was attractive and met code and easy to go through. So thank you.
Absolutely.